This is Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that explores different areas of the arts and cultural production with me, Paula Blair. Visit patreon.com/AV Cultures to find out more and to join the pod. Well, hello, I hope everybody is doing well out there. We're having a bit of a music theme this April, it turns out, on Audiovisual Cultures. I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to my guest this time, Dan Hughes. Dan, would you like to say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi there, thank you very much for having me come on. I'm a professional musician. I've been doing it for about 10 years, maybe a bit more than that. And I'm in a musical project called DHT, and I compose music and I tour and gig and do different kind of stuff. I'm a working musician.
Whereabouts do we find you today, Dan?
I am in sunny Northamptonshire, which is about an hour outside of London, in between Birmingham and London, sort of East Midlands.
Yeah, so we've got quite a lot we can get into. You've given us a little bit of an introduction there to you've got quite a few different areas of your practice. So we might take some of those and have a deeper look at them. And then we might get into, the big issue of our times, the enforced lockdown and how that's impacted you and that sort of thing. I think before we do that, if we just get a bigger picture of your work. So you're a singer-songwriter, guitarist, and you're a composer. Would you like to tell us a bit about your singing and the live aspect of your work?
Sure. So I started playing, my father played guitar, so I sort of picked up the guitars through that. And as a teenager, and then my late teens, I started playing in bands. And then I went to study music in Brighton when I was 16, and I was lucky enough to audition and get into a place called BIM, which is now scattered all around Europe, and I'm lucky enough to be taught by some fantastic guitar players. And then sort of since then, I left when I was about 21, and then so literally I've just gigged as much as I could within that time, and making records and sometimes doing teaching and touring and just collectively lots of different stuff.
How would you describe the music that you would play or write?
That's a good question. I'd say like very rhythmic and melody driven stuff, usually quite soul driven maybe, and euphoric, so quite like positive stuff with groove based, and try and add maybe some humor into it as well. Just lots of it's very difficult to describe your own music. I don't know, it's like very sort of maybe kind of earnest in some respects, in the fact that it's just I just try and write honestly.
Yeah, well, I suppose then, in your songwriting, what would you write about? What kind of topics, what kind of themes come up?
Life, really. Things that have happened, maybe when I've been traveling, gigging, or some things that pop up in a conversation, or for instance, I'm working on a song at the moment called Joanna, which I found the inspiration for that after connecting with somebody from LinkedIn. I just thought that name's unusual, so I thought I'll write a song about it. And you do. Songwriting for a band is very different to songwriting for a project where someone commissions you to write. Like, they set you a narrative that you have to write towards, whereas when you write for yourself, you write because you feel maybe a bit more emotionally connected to it.
So would you say there was an element of storytelling? Do you think you get an idea for a story sparked by something, and does it take you that way, or is it emotion based? Is that what leads you when you're writing songs for yourself?
I think it's very melody driven, my music, as opposed to lyrics. Lyrics are important, obviously, but very rarely do I write the words and then write the music. It's usually the music and then the words fall into the melody, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's useful. Do you think then the music, the sound of the music, the melody, do you think then that's evoking feelings and that would maybe stir something? Is that more the idea?
Yeah, like, so I always think I come from a place where the melody is more important. Like, I'm not necessarily like a Bob Dylan kind of writer where I write lots of verses and fit as many words in. Like, I'm more about the melody. Like, I want the listener to be walking down the street or driving in the car, and then all of a sudden that melody hits their head, as opposed to I don't know. I always think there's too much depression stuff in the world already. It's like that no one needs to hear negativity in songs. I like people to feel happy when they listen to the stuff I write, I think.
That's a really nice answer. So the aim is to try and make something that can draw a smile or just distract somebody from a problem for a moment or something like that.
Yeah, like I have a sort of euphoric feeling. My favourite artists have the ability to, when you listen to their music, almost take you away to a different world, which I would always like to try and capture, if that makes sense.
I think so, yeah. And maybe that helps us move into then more the composition side and perhaps the projects that you were talking about, because you know, your profile says that you also compose for the likes of film, television and podcasts and other media. There must be a real difference for you between you getting an idea for a melody and you being maybe commissioned to do something and told, okay, so I want the listener to maybe feel, oh, this is inquisitive, or this is a sad one, or this is happy but not kitsch. You know, like, how does that work for you?
I think in some ways, when you get commissioned for stuff, it's a lot difficult because it's like you're trying to get in the mind of the person that you're being commissioned for to try and figure out what they want. So it's like trying to find out what somebody wants in their mind is very difficult. Like, it's hard enough trying to get songs out of your own mind, but it's harder to get songs out of other people's minds that you never even met. So it can be a challenge at times, but it's really enjoyable. I like it, and I really enjoy hearing my music on different projects. It gives me a sense of pride that something I've written has been used for different things.
Do you have any examples? You know, do you get commissioned to do maybe adverts, or is it maybe the likes of one day it might be a jingle, the next day it might be music that's designed to go underneath a voice, or, you know, what kind of thing would you be doing exactly?
It can literally be anything from doing like a video for an independent film, or a podcast, or working for other ecologists, or lots of different avenues. Predominantly it's been podcast, really. It seems to be but I think podcasts are so in vogue that there's a lot of them, and there seems to be a bit more work doing that kind of thing. And also obviously film, a lot of it's budget dependent. So lots of people write films, but they don't necessarily come out. Especially in California, there's a lot of wannabe film directors that are trying to crack it and don't. So you end up writing for projects and they don't necessarily come out, whereas podcasts tend to all get used eventually.
Yeah, I think there are probably more avenues for being able to put our stuff out when it's audio at the moment. How do those commissions work? Do people get in touch with you, or is it a mixture? Do you have to hustle very much, or, you know, how is it working at the moment?
I would like to tell you that I just sit there and the emails flood in, but reality they do not. So I have to email every day, contact, and sometimes contact them again and again, and it's like selling anything. It's a massive game of rejection. Almost all the time you get it. Like, basically, if you don't like rejection, don't bother doing that job, because almost all the time you'll get rejected. Most people will say no, but it's that 5% that make it worth it. You know, and you only need that 5-10% of people to like what you're doing, and you're successful at it.
I think that's an important area, actually, because we don't talk enough about rejection. And I think I've seen more actors, including quite famous people, talking about this more recently, where actually most of what they do is getting rejected. Even people you'd be surprised at. You know, we only talk about our successes, really, and those are measured in quite arbitrary ways.
If you're doing anything that's worthwhile, then rejection's almost a natural part of it. If you're putting yourself out there to try and succeed at something, then rejection is almost sort of like the main ingredient of success, because success is something you learn from, not something that defeats you. You have to get up and just fight again, really.
Yes, and it could be many different factors involved in either a success or a rejection as well. It's not necessarily something personal, and it's quite easy to take it personal.
I think certainly early on when I was doing what I was doing, I used to take it very personally and get upset about it. But the longer I've been doing it, the less I sort of get fazed by it, really.
Do you find it easier to just go, oh, okay, that's fine, file it, move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I think you have to, otherwise you just be like a blubbering mess all your life. You have to just get on with it.
But you've tried out so many different things as a musician, as a jobbing musician as well, as you say. Can you give us any examples of any other things you've done, when you've been able to gig around and things? You told me before that you were flat out before everything went into lockdown. So you must have been doing a lot of traveling and lots of different venues. And I mean, is there anything sort of weird and wonderful you can tell us about?
Well, yeah, definitely. The past sort of like 9-10 months before the lockdown, I was just gigging around the Midlands area really. And that sort of become very tiresome in places because you're just doing it a lot. So in a way, the lockdown was quite a blessing because it made me have a bit of a break. But before then, the year before that, I had a residency in Hull to Belgium on a ferry for about 3 months, which was interesting. And then after that, I went to the Caribbean for 6 months and did a residency there. And then for the past sort of 4 years, 5 years, I've been gigging out in the Far East. So I've been going to South Korea and Japan and touring the records I make out there.
What's reception like in these different areas? How are your live audiences? Or if you're touring with a record that you've made, an album or something, how do you find from place to place? It's how you received?
I mean, the Far East is amazing. Some of the best gigs I've ever done have been out there, and the crowds are so good, so kind and generous and nice, and just fantastic, really. It's an amazing part of the world that holds a special place in my heart for sure. The audiences there are amazing. And some of the gigs I've done have been insane. Like I've done like major festivals out there, and I've played. I did one gig in front of 1,000 people in this small village for the government, and it was like insane. It was just amazing. Yeah, it's wow, so good.
I'm quite curious about the residency on a ferry. So it was a transit, so it wasn't, how long was it? Was it sort of 8 hours or something like that, and you were entertainment?
It was an overnight ferry from Hull to Amsterdam and Hull to Belgium.
Okay.
I don't think it's there anymore, actually. I think they've stopped it. But yeah, I mean, what kind of thing do you want to know about it?
What did they expect from you? I mean, were you doing your own music, or were you having to do covers and things? How did it work?
That kind of gig is predominantly covers. Sometimes you'll do stuff. I'll try and maybe throw some of my own stuff in there when nobody else is there, maybe, or less people are there. Those kind of jobs are very corporate, to be honest. Yeah, it was all right. It wasn't great. It was okay. It was experience, and it was going from doing your own thing and being freelance to being strictly employed, and especially in a situation where you don't it's not like a 9 to 5. Like you get to end your day and then go home. You spend 24 hours on a boat, so you're working all the time. It can be intense. There's a lot of real sort of bitter musicians that get on that boat that get stuck in that gig forever. And that can be quite a negative experience, hanging out with people that are sort of disillusioned by that kind of life. I think that those kind of gigs are better to kind of dip your toe in when you need money and then try and leave as quick as you can. Don't make it a lifestyle, make it something you use for yourself, I think.
Yeah. I mean, is it something do they tell you what songs their audiences, or their passengers might want, or that they like themselves, or do you get to choose what you think you're comfortable with? Is it an opportunity for you to play songs you really love and really inspire you, for example?
I always try and play songs that are, even the covers that I do, like they're songs that I feel connected to, because if I don't, then I'm just lying. I think it's a balancing act from making them do what you want. So sort of doing enough to get them off your back, but then also doing your own thing as well. It's like a balancing act between the two. Like you can't go and play avant-garde jazz or play any prog rock or heavy rock or anything like that. But you sort of like play the game enough for them to sort of play a top 40 hit and then go and play something you want. So you like contrast it a little bit.
Going from something like that, I mean, you mentioned that actually being enforced to stay at home and not be able to have the choice to do that sort of work anymore, and the gigs have stopped, certainly in an in-person sense. What has your lockdown experience been as a musician?
Well, initially panic, because I was like, my money's gone, what am I going to do? Probably like most of the world. and then I sort of got into a new routine. So I thought, well, this is a fun. I kind of looked upon it as that I have the rest of my life to gig and perform. And, I'll probably be doing it when I'm 80. They'll be wheeling me out to the local pub or something, and I'll be playing a gig. So taking 2 years out, 3 years out even, hopefully not. But in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing too big. So I thought, well, I might as well try and utilise the time I have to try and be as productive as I can be, and flex new muscles, really. When you do lots of gigs, you end up just being on autopilot and sort of doing the same thing all the time. It's sort of can be very relentless. From 23, I've done like 200 gigs a year pretty much. So for the past 10 years, so that's very tiring. So it's good to kind of step away from that really and be creative and write music and talk to people like you on podcasts and connect with new people. It's good.
Yeah, it's strange that we were speaking earlier. Certainly me making this, it's opened up a lot of the world to me. And as you say, just this ability to make new connections and to, after that initial panic, to be forced to go, okay, well, look, there are creative solutions that are possible here. There are things we can do. That opportunity that the circumstances have enforced, but in a way gifted to us. It's that chance to, okay, I mean, what if you were on the verge of a burnout or something? Because as you say, you've been grafting away and pushing yourself maybe. And when you are freelance and you just have to take a gig is a gig and you're just taking it when it comes, there's not really much time to stop and have a rest, have a holiday, that sort of stuff. So, it's good that you've had a positive response at least to try and use the time really well.
Well, I think, above, people kind of put themselves in a frame of being like either a musician or a filmmaker or a podcast, social media person, or really above all those things, we're creative people. They're just vehicles for what you do. Above that, you should be creative and try and, like for me, I play music, but actually above that really is for me to be creative and to pursue like a free lifestyle that I can navigate myself. That's more important to me than actually playing music. As much as I love playing music, like I want a lifestyle that I can control and be the kingmaker of, basically. And I think most creative people strive for that, because there's little point being in. I've had jobs playing music where on paper they sound amazing, but at the end of the day you're working for somebody else and you're in a controlled environment, which isn't always good.
Yeah, and that creativity, it's not always something that can be forced. If somebody's arched over you, saying, right, come on, write this, or it has to be nurtured, it has to come from somewhere. And sometimes you just actually need to procrastinate or rest or think about something entirely different for a while, and then it'll come to you, and I think if you have a sensibility where you can't maybe work, you might not be wired to work in a uniform 9-to-5 way, but if you have that space, you might actually produce something. I mean, has this been a time where you've been able to reflect and maybe do writing or maybe try different things?
Yes, I compose before gigging. I found it very difficult to find time to flex the writing muscle, because it's a different muscle when you're performing. It's a different outlook on your performance, whereas if you're creative, it's a different muscle. So like going from one another it can be very distracting, because you aren't sort of in that vein of creativity, whereas the lockdown has sort of provided that kind of chance to be more creative, I think.
Sure. There are a lot of musicians who've still managed to find online platforms for doing live work. I mean, have you been able to pick up any teaching or any live stuff?
Yes, I've been really fortunate to have a few students before lockdown came down, like a handful of them, and touch wood, they've stayed throughout. They've been fantastic. It's been an absolute blessing for them to be still coming to lessons, and I really enjoy teaching them. So I've been doing that, and obviously been doing my composition side of things. So those two things have been the two main things, really. I think I've done some like live stream stuff for other bands that I've played for, but I haven't really gone out of the way to do live stream stuff, really, because I don't know, there's kind of like a forced side to it, I think.
As much as anyone can, do you have any ideas for the future, for when we might begin to emerge from all of this? Or are you taking it as it comes and you're still just concentrating on nourishing that creativity at the moment?
Well, regarding gigs, I think it still hasn't opened up yet enough to see where the land lies with it. It's a good question. Some days you feel like, I suppose like anybody, some days you feel like one thing and the other days you feel like another. I think it's still an element of it having to be a waiting game to see where the land lies and see where you can kind of if you can carve out a living again, and hopefully live music will return and come back stronger. Really hope.
I think so. I think there's definitely a hunger for it, but probably the likes of singing isn't the safest thing at the moment. So maybe hoping for good weather and do some outdoor stuff where people can spread out.
Yeah, like I have a few gigs in the summer booked and stuff like that, so that's all good. But I think it's just a case of just continuing on what I'm doing really and see where that takes me, and then just wait for just keep hustling and reaching out to people and seeing where things lead. Everything changes with a phone call and an email. When you're freelance like that, you've got to have that mentality that all it takes is for one phone call to turn up, and then that can change your life, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. So Dan, I was wondering as well, because before we started recording, we got into this a little bit, but I was wondering if you wanted to, we don't have to, but if you wanted to maybe speak to, we were talking about, just the landscape for freelance creatives at the moment in the UK, and if you had anything you'd like to say, because this podcast, it's about the work and it's about practice and practitioners, but it's also about, well, the other factors involved with that is what are the things that enable that creativity, and it is things like funding structures and distribution platforms and things. I think, we were talking a bit as well about, maybe our audiences, our different kinds of audiences, they might have some preconceptions about what it is that we do and how we get paid and things, and that we get paid at all can be a misconception. I just wondered if you had anything you would like to say about, free or cheap labour, or the support or lack thereof that people like us have had, or, if there's anything at all you'd want to speak to, because I think it's all relevant and important and people really need to know.
Well, I think it's massively important to make people aware of that situation, because I don't think it's made aware enough, really. Creative people provide opportunities and provide jobs and provide avenues for people to be able to create a life. I think the way that a society treats creative people is a reflection on how they treat people in society in general. So if the powers that be treat creative people or people that try and push the boundaries badly, then it's just a reflection on how they end up treating everybody else, really. And I think, like in Britain, there's kind of an attitude of a lot of the time when it's, well, I'm all right, Jack, so it doesn't matter about you. And that's not really the truth, because everybody needs to succeed. It's not just about certain sections of society succeeding. Everybody has to have the opportunity to better themselves, I think. And I feel like that it's getting harder to do that in the UK. And I think the self-employment help has been really bad. Like I've known people that are, who are self-employed and haven't had a penny of help throughout the whole time, which is awful. I'm really quite passionate about the way self-employed people have been treated.
Yeah, I feel the same. So many of us just didn't qualify at all for the self-employed scheme. And even this latest round of it, I think there's a massive delay in even releasing it for this lockdown that we're in at the moment in spring 2021.
Yeah, it's been like a month and a half, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is insane. And even the amount of money that even like I've been lucky enough to qualify for it, but even the money that you get for the qualification of it is pathetic compared to how people that have been furloughed. They're getting basically full 80% to full pay, and we're getting, I think the average person that gets self-employment help check is around 1,400 quid for 3 months. It's crap. It's not good. You can't live off that, can you?
No, so I think that, again, that's important for people to be aware of, because we've all been consuming culture so much throughout lockdown, especially people where maybe they haven't been continuing to work if they have been furloughed. So many people have gone to streaming sites or YouTube, and the content providers are still beavering away, working at everything and trying to put stuff out there for people. I think there's just an assumption that you're recompensed for that, or you do it for the love of it, and that's enough nourishment for you, but it doesn't pay rent.
Yeah, like exposure pays the bills, isn't it? Apparently.
Yeah, so it's been a really tough climate, I think, and I've been really lucky on making the podcast where, you know, I've had a lot of people who are maybe at a point in their careers where they're relatively successful, and they've reached out to me and said, oh, I'll be a guest on your podcast. And that's been a huge help to me, actually, because that's exposed me to people who know them and like their work. So then I've had some more listens because of that, and that's been really kind. I think certainly in the podcasting world, where there's so many of us who are indie podcasters, we've been trying to help each other out a little bit more by guesting on each other's podcasts, and we're all doing this for free. Nobody's getting paid for it.
Well, I think independent and alternative culture is where the real art's made. It's where the real music, it's where the real podcast, it's where the real creativity comes from. Like all the best bands and all the best movements have come from independent or alternative avenues. So that needs to be protected. Otherwise, we're going to get a world of Justin Bieber's and corporate rock.
No, absolutely. So I mean, it's just this constant battle to survive, you know. So I just think it was important really to say something about that. And I'm a real
like I think there needs to be a conversation about how the streaming platforms work. If we're heading towards more of an automated world, then we need to have a fairer chunk of the pie, really. And that's not being greedy. Like something you create, you know, because I don't know how much a stream earns you, like 0.00001 p or something ridiculous. Like it needs to be more than that. If we're living in more of a content-driven society, well, then content needs to be valued more, not being devalued. Well, it is valued, but it reaches the wrong people's pockets. It hits, you know, the CEO of Spotify earns far too much money for what he gets. And I think there's an element of creative people are obsessed about numbers and views on Facebook and likes and stuff like that. It's more of an ego thing. Like I would rather us get better paid than have 100,000 views on YouTube.
Yeah, totally agree. Completely. Yeah, because there's something visible and performative almost about the likes. So that's something I try not to worry about is oh, nobody's paid attention to this in social media. Well, actually maybe hundreds, thousands of people have seen this, but they're just not hitting that button. You know, it's the quality of the engagement, I think, from your viewers, your listeners, that sort of stuff, isn't it? Rather than the amount.
Yeah, and all it takes is one person to listen to your podcast, to listen to your music that gets affected by it. Then, you know, if you're making something but then that one person is affected by it, that's a huge thing. That may not translate to money, but if people are moved by it and they love it, and then isn't that the ultimate kind of compliment?
Yeah, and I think it's nice as well if when we are moved by something we've spent some time with, it's really nice to let that person know, you know, the person who made it. Recently, I've had just some really, really lovely, encouraging feedback from the odd person. And you think, oh gosh, that's just made my day. That's made that whole thing worthwhile. Yes, okay, so it's not going to pay any bills. It's not going to buy me food, but it makes me want to keep going, which is really important.
I think just because you are being creative doesn't mean you're necessarily desperate for downloads or you want to be massively. Like I certainly didn't get into music because I thought I'd want to be famous. Not that I am famous, but I don't do it because I'm looking to be famous. I'm doing it because I love music, like somebody loves fixing cars. Or I think if you do something you love, then eventually things do work out. I hope.
That's it. You just have to keep plugging away, and hopefully it does work out for us. A previous guest I've had on said, just do good work. Just make sure your work is really good and it will come right. That was somebody who had struggled in audio drama, audio fiction for about 14 years before it finally just clicked and he was getting requests that he couldn't even keep up with and finally starting to get money for projects and stuff.
Yeah, like you hit veins of success. Do you know what I mean? Like before lockdown, I had a vein of success gigging, like I was inundated. But there was periods of time before then when it was like a desert and there was nothing, or very struggling. Or I think the key to success is just keep going. And sometimes success isn't what you think it is. So like in your mind, you think there's a destination that you're going to arrive one day and be like, yeah, I've made it. I see, I'm done, I'm finished. But like even when you arrive at that point, you just keep wanting other things. So like I remember when I came back from Brighton and I didn't have any gigs, I was thinking, oh man, if I could get 1 gig a week. And then like 5 years down the line, I was gigging like 7 days a week. And then you think, oh, if only I had a night off. You know what I mean? You never kind of win. It's either feast or famine, I think.
Yeah. Dan, is there anything we haven't chatted about so far today that you really wanted to get into, that you really wanted to talk about?
I've just released a new EP, collaborated with a girl from Taiwan. Well, she's an artist and she's called Sea Drop. We met online and we did a remote EP. It's the first time I did a remote EP. We both sort of composed the tracks together. Some of the tracks are in Cantonese, some of them are in English, and it's like almost like a concept album about waking up in the morning to going to bed at night. We both sing on it, so it's like conversations. It's almost like a conversation between two of us, and I'm really proud of it. It's a good record.
That sounds brilliant. And whereabouts can people find that?
You can find it through my website, www.danhughesmusic.com. You can also find it on my Facebook, which you can find it through my website, which is Dan Hughes Music. On Spotify, it's DHT, and the record's called Breaking the Day.
Brilliant. Sounds great. That international collaboration that's been made possible from your house has just been amazing, I think, this past while.
Yeah, it's a crazy concept that you get to be able to collaborate with people that you're never gonna meet. Also, I'm working on, I'm helping translate at the moment a Beatles book from English to Korean, and hopefully that's going to come out at some point too.
Do you speak Korean then?
Not very well.
But you can help with the meanings of things?
I can help with the meanings, yeah. I can speak a little bit, not loads. Enough to get by. You kind of need to when you go out of that part of the world, because some places you go, there's no English.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, so you've told us about your website. That's brilliant. And do you have any other socials or anything you want to point people towards?
All the socials are on my website anyway, but Facebook is probably my main, and YouTube are my main two social media platforms.
Well, Dan Hughes, thank you so much. It's been a really lovely conversation. I hope you've had something out of it as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me as a guest.
Yeah, you've been most welcome. Thank you. So I'll put your website, that'll be in the show notes wherever this is going out, so people can have no excuse but to go and look at your work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been a Cozy Peapod production with me, Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, used under a non-commercial 3.0 Creative Commons license, and is available at ccmixter.org. We are AV Cultures Pod on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and you can also join the conversation on Discord. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favourite podcast app, including YouTube if you find auto captions useful, and please share with your networks. You'll find links and ways to contact us at audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com. We're always really happy to hear from potential guests and ways to improve the show. As well as supporting the pod and receiving member benefits over on Patreon, you can also help at buymeacoffee.com/PEA Blair. Thanks so much for listening. Catch you next time.